SlL kept insulting my husband for being a stay-at-home dad, and I snapped. I told her how my husband had supported their entire family during hard times at her wedding dinner. So, here's the backstory. I'm 28F, and my husband Jason is 29M. We met 6 years ago and got married about 3 years ago. We also have a 1-year-old daughter together. We met through my brother, who's good friends with Jason because of their line of work. Jason used to be a cop, and my brother runs a pizza place that Jason frequently visited. They struck up a friendship. In 1 year, my brother invited Jason home for Thanksgiving. That's when we met for the first time. Soon after, I asked him out, and we started dating. After being together for 3 years, he proposed, and we got married. I had met his family quite a few times before the marriage, and most of them were always very warm to me, with the exception of my sister-in-law, Janice, 27F. Even my mother-in-law was pretty nice to me, but for some reason, Janice never was. Jason kept telling me she would come around eventually, but she never did. She didn't outright show her dislike for me, and she was subtle about it, with backhanded compliments and insults disguised as jokes. You know, the usual. At first, it really got on my nerves, but after a while, I learned to ignore it. It didn't make sense to give her the satisfaction of letting her get under my skin. She never said anything in front of Jason, probably because she didn't want to risk turning him against her. But he knew about the tension between us and made sure I was never left alone with her whenever we visited his family. I didn't want him to cut his family off or even cut his sister off because it just wasn't worth it to go to that much trouble over a few mean jokes and insults. So, we dealt with it by not dealing with it. We let her say whatever she wanted while I tried my best to ignore it. Jason did the same. It wasn't ideal, but we didn't have much of a choice. We just had to suck it up and let her continue with her behavior. We wanted to maintain peace in the family. Thinking back on it, I really wish I'd spoken up earlier instead of being self-conscious and afraid of being labeled as the woman who gets mad at every little thing and breaks up families. That's why I stayed quiet for so long. But I couldn't anymore after what happened recently. Jason had been a cop, but he quit the force a few months ago because he wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. I'm a working mother, and I don't have an easy job. I'm a trauma surgeon. We were struggling to make the work-life balance work. Of course, both of us had high-pressure jobs and couldn't afford to spend much time at home. We had daycare, and our parents would take care of our daughter whenever we needed them to, but it wasn't good enough for us. We were missing out on spending time with her, and it felt like she was going to grow up without her parents around much if we continued that way. So about a year ago, Jason and I had a serious conversation about it. He told me he was going to quit the force to spend more time with our daughter at home. I didn't force him into making that decision, but he decided it for himself because I made more money than him, and he believed it was only fair that he quit his job so our daughter would have at least one of us around for most of the day. I asked him if he was sure about it, probably thousands of times, before I was finally convinced he really wanted to go through with this and become a full-time dad. It was a huge step to take, and I knew how much my husband enjoyed being a cop. I wanted to make sure he wouldn't resent me for it, but I don't think he would, because he seems more than happy to spend his days taking care of the household and our daughter. The last time we spoke about it was just a few weeks ago. He told me that, initially, he had found it a little difficult to adjust to being a stay-at-home dad after working for so many years. But with time, it became easier for him because he could spend time with our daughter. He seems quite content with his life and how everything has turned out for him. He doesn't seem to have any complaints because he says that his dream job used to be being a cop, but now it's being a father. That's pretty beautiful. His family, however, doesn't see any beauty in the situation. I should have seen it coming because they're pretty traditional. They do allow women to work, and most of the women in their family have jobs, but the men aren't allowed to work at home. None of the men in Jason's family even touch the household chores because they consider it beneath their dignity. So, eventually, the women in their families end up doing the household work along with their jobs, or are forced to quit their jobs like my mother-in-law did. The crazy part is they don't even see anything wrong with this arrangement. They think it's completely fine. Jason and I have discussed this, and we both agree that it's a ridiculous way of thinking. But we never spoke about it with his family because they would just come up with some stupid arguments to cover up the misogyny, and we didn't want to get into that. If they were happy living their lives that way, who are we to judge them? Thankfully, Jason and I always split everything equally, and sometimes he would even do more of the household work than me if I ended up working late. Now, of course, he's doing everything at home and holding down the fort while I bring home the money. It doesn't really matter who does what, as long as we're all happy and healthy and there's food on the table. His parents and sister, however, strongly disagree with this and are very upset with Jason's decision to quit the force and stay at home with our daughter. They think it makes him less of a man and have been arguing with him for months about it. I tried to intervene at first, but his parents made it very clear that my interference would only make their relationship worse. Jason didn't want me to come to his defense either, because he didn't want to involve me in this mess. So I stayed out of their way. It took them a while, but they did come around to our new arrangement and haven't brought it up for quite a few months. It also probably helped that they had new things to think about, like Janice getting married. Her boyfriend of 2 years, Harry, 27M, proposed to her, and after that, everybody pretty much forgot about Jason's decision. This was a much bigger deal, duh. We were thankful they got engaged at that time because it helped take the heat off us for a few months. Nobody from his family brought up Jason's decision to quit the force, and we thought this had finally blown over. We thought we wouldn't have to hear about the man's role in his family again. But then Janice held her rehearsal dinner yesterday. That's when it came up again. I had a bit of an outburst. Janice is getting married tomorrow, so this is a bit of an emergency. We need to figure out what to do about this quickly, as it's time sensitive, duh. While we were at dinner, Jason and I were sitting opposite Janice and Harry. Their parents and a few other family members were also there, and we were having a normal, fun chat. Nothing too controversial. I was relieved that we were finally getting along with his family like before. It was a big deal, especially after how upset everybody had been when Jason quit the force. I didn't think this would happen again, but then Janice decided to go off topic and asked me how my work was going. I felt uncomfortable, but had to answer since it was a normal and innocent question. I knew where she was about to take it. I told her that my work was great and left it at that, hoping she'd take the hint and not drag it out. But then she asked Jason how his work was going and cracked a joke about how his job finally allows him to take time off without worrying about anything, because now his life is just a long vacation since he's living off my income. She didn't stop there and went on to say that at least now it's clear to everybody who wears the pants in our family. She cracked a few more jokes that were below the belt and kept making fun of Jason while he quietly tried to ignore it and smile through it all, taking it like a sport. But I couldn't handle it anymore and just lost control. It was probably years of her getting on my nerves and months of dealing with Jason's family and their annoying beliefs. Something in me just snapped, and I decided to bring up something nobody wanted to hear. I told her she could crack as many jokes as she wanted, but Jason was still a better man and an overall better human being than everybody in their family combined. I told her she really had some audacity to make fun of Jason, considering she wouldn't even have been able to go to college had it not been for him. She never would have met Harry if Jason hadn't given money to his parents to help them out, ever since he was 18. Nobody liked talking about it because it was a dark period in their lives, but Jason's father had lost his job when Jason was still in high school. Janice was too spoiled to even notice what was happening, but Jason stepped in and paid for the entire family's living expenses so they wouldn't lose their house. He even paid for Janice's college tuition when her parents refused to help her out. Harry's family had helped a bit too, but it was really Jason's generosity and kindness that got them through it all. I told Janice she owed everything to Jason, and at least he'd made a much better choice than her husband would ever make, staying with her when she clearly only thought of him as an ATM. It was at this point that she lost her cool and stormed off, embarrassed. I wasn't about to let her walk all over Jason anymore, and I'm not sorry I said what I said. Later on, I thought about it and realized I'd said too much. Still, I'm glad I stood up for my husband.